Welcome to Chapter 8 of The Bronze Kings, The Military Problem. In Chapter 7, we watched Constitutional Amendment Proposal 7 nearly pass. 84 against, 79 for, 5-vote margin. Gilgamesh entered the chamber, 187 years old, hands trembling, spending his last authority to preserve constitutional equality. Partnership survived. Barely. Through the founder's personal weight, not institutional resilience. But constitutional protection can't prevent all forms of consolidation. Political equality doesn't eliminate military superiority. And when enhanced warriors face baseline resistance, capability determines outcomes regardless of partnership principles. This is Chapter 8, The Military Problem. Lugal is leading what should be a routine operation, enhanced warriors. Baseline settlement refusing authority. Suppress resistance, minimal force. Clean execution. Everything Korrath taught him about tactical optimization and emotional detachment. 53 baseline civilians die. Not combatants. Civilians. All refuse to flee when ordered. Standing their ground against warriors whose enhanced reflexes make resistance futile. Biology doesn't negotiate. Superiority is absolute. Baseline courage becomes suicide when facing enhanced military capability. Lugal reports mission success. Acceptable casualties given non-compliance. Professional execution. Tactical perfection. Korrath trained Lugal. Now watches his student apply lessons precisely as taught. Enhanced speed, emotional detachment, optimization, everything an immortal warrior would teach. Everything that makes enhanced military dominance operational rather than hypothetical. Inkatic was among the dead. Enochian Order member. Embedded in the settlement documenting resistance. He died proving Order members Chapter 8, The Military Problem. Uruk, Mesopotamia 2834 BCE, 1 year after weighted voting defeat. The command center occupied the eastern wing of Uruk's military complex, its walls lined with clay tablets documenting troop deployments, supply inventories, training schedules, and tactical assessments. Lugal stood at the central table where a scaled map of the region surrounding Uruk was laid out in carefully pressed clay, topography marked with precision, settlements indicated by size, trade routes traced in red ochre, and disputed territories marked in black. 29 years old now. Enhanced warrior. Korrath's prize student. Commander of Uruk's defense force for 3 years, a position achieved through demonstrated capability that partnership institutions called meritocracy, while everyone understood it meant enhanced humans led, and baseline humans followed. The officer assignments lay before him on tablets requiring annual review. 22 command positions across Uruk's military structure. Lugal traced the names with one finger, enhancing cognitive processing not just of individuals but also of patterns that revealed what partnership couldn't prevent. Enhanced commanders, 18. Tactical command, 8 enhanced. Strategic planning, 4 enhanced. Training operations, 3 enhanced. Special forces, 3 enhanced. Baseline commanders, 4. Logistics coordination, 2 baseline. Supply management, 1 baseline. Administrative support, 1 baseline. The distribution wasn't policy. Wasn't discrimination. Was the capability producing outcomes through mechanisms that partnership institutions couldn't constrain? Enhanced warriors processed threats faster, calculated tactics more efficiently, and coordinated actions with superior precision. They weren't better humans. They were better warriors by every measurable combat metric. And metrics mattered when lives were at stake. Kamen entered, enhanced lieutenant, 26 years old, tactical specialist who'd trained under Lugal for 5 years. His movement carried the unconscious efficiency that enhanced the kinesthetic feedback provided, every gesture economical and purposeful. Morning assessment, Kamen reported, setting down fresh tablets. Border Patrol reports increased activity along the western trade route. 3 separate sightings of armed groups near disputed grazing territories. Probably scouts from the baseline communities we've had tensions with. Lugal studied the reports. 40 kilometers west. The communities that partnership councils had failed to resolve disputes with for 3 years. Competing claims over water access, grazing rights, and trade route control. Both sides have legitimate grievances. Partnership institutions are designed to mediate such conflicts through negotiation rather than force. Partnership institutions are proving insufficient when biology creates different capabilities for defending claims. What's patrol strength in that sector? Lugal asked. Mixed unit. 12 soldiers, 8 enhanced, 4 baseline. Standard integration ratio per partnership protocols. And if they encounter armed resistance? Protocol says coordinate with baseline co-commanders before engagement. Request permission for tactical response. Document everything for partnership review. Kamen's voice carried the flat tone of someone reciting procedures he didn't believe served military effectiveness. Lugal felt the familiar tension between what partnership required and what combat demanded. Partnership said to integrate. Consult. Achieve consensus before acting. Military reality said threats didn't wait for consensus. Enhanced soldiers saw attacks 200 milliseconds earlier than baseline soldiers, who finished processing the initial threat assessment. Maintain patrols, Lugal said. But authorize tactical response without coordination delay if attacked. We're not losing enhanced soldiers because partnership protocols make them wait for permission from commanders who process too slowly to approve action in time. That violates standing partnership oversight procedures. That prioritizes survival over procedure. Document my authorization. Partnership can review after our soldiers are alive to explain decisions. Lugal met Kamen's eyes. How many training exercises have we run where partnership protocols got hypothetical soldiers killed? 47 scenarios over 2 years. Exactly. Partnership works in the council chambers. Doesn't work in combat. I won't sacrifice warriors to institutional performance. Kamen departed to relay orders. Lugal returned to officer assignments, processing the mathematics that partnership couldn't acknowledge. Biology determined capability. Capability determined military outcomes. Pretending otherwise served political comfort while producing suboptimal results that risked lives. The weighted voting amendment had failed a year ago. Gilgamesh's intervention preserved constitutional equality. But constitutional equality didn't make baseline warriors process threats as fast as enhanced warriors. Didn't make partnership protocols effective when milliseconds mattered. Didn't prevent biology from determining who lived and died when violence was real. The military was a domain where capability advantages were most immediately visible, most directly consequential, and most impossible to constrain through institutional equality. Training grounds, Uruk's military complex. 3 hours after dawn. Dust rose from the practice field where 60 soldiers trained in integrated units, a partnership requirement that enhanced and baseline warriors operate together, share command structures, and build mutual capability through joint operations, theory meeting practice. Institutional idealism encountering biological reality. Lugal observed from an elevated platform where commanders evaluated performance. Korrath stood beside him, an immortal warrior, 54,000 years old, a teacher whose principles had shaped Lugal's tactical thinking, a mentor whose pride in his students' development had been stated publicly and often. Watch Unit 7, Korrath said, gesturing, indicating mixed formation executing coordinated maneuvers. Note how enhanced soldiers anticipate movements before baseline soldiers complete instructions. Unit 7, 10 enhanced warriors, 5 baseline warriors. Partnership integration creates a force that combines both population strengths, practice showing a different pattern. The drill scenario, sudden threat from multiple directions requiring coordinated response under time pressure. Enhanced soldiers saw threats, calculated optimal responses, and executed coordinated defense. Baseline soldiers processed the initial threat assessment, while enhanced soldiers were already 3 moves into the tactical sequence. Enhanced warriors leading. Baseline warriors following. The partnership structure maintained the appearance of integration, while capability differences produced a functional hierarchy. Baseline soldiers can't process fast enough, Lugal observed. Not criticism. Biology. Enhanced reflexes give a 200 millisecond advantage in threat recognition. By the time baseline warrior sees the attack and formulates a response, enhanced warrior has executed a countermove and proceeded to the next tactical decision. Can baseline soldiers contribute? Korrath asked. In logistics, yes. In sustained operations, yes. In split-second tactical decisions, no. They follow enhanced leadership, or they die. That's not discrimination. That's survival. The drill concluded, enhanced soldiers' efficiency, coordination, and professional execution of complex maneuvers. Baseline soldiers disciplined, followed orders, and maintained formations designed by enhanced tactical thinking, but they couldn't fully evaluate during combat at speed. Darien approached, baseline soldier, 32 years old, 15 years in Uruk's military, one of 4 baseline commanders despite being more experienced than half the enhanced officers who outranked him. His movement lacked enhanced efficiency but carried the veteran's confidence built through years of compensating for biological disadvantages. Unit evaluations, Darien reported, voice neutral but eyes showing frustration Lugal had learned to recognize. Enhanced units, excellent tactical performance. Baseline units, adequate execution following enhanced direction. Adequate isn't a compliment, Lugal observed. Adequate is what baseline soldiers achieve when we can't process fast enough to lead. We follow. We support. We maintain logistics. But we don't command in combat because by the time we understand the tactical situation, enhanced commanders have already made 3 decisions we're still evaluating. Darien met Lugal's eyes with honesty born of accepting the reality that partnership wouldn't acknowledge. Partnership says integrate. Biology says enhance lead, or everyone dies more slowly. I understand why the officer corps is 18 enhanced, 4 baseline. Don't like it. But understand it. The question is whether partnership institutions will ever acknowledge what everyone in the military already knows. He departed, leaving Lugal and Korrath to process the truth the baseline soldier had clearly stated: the military hierarchy wasn't discriminatory. Was capability producing outcomes when capabilities differed, and outcomes were measured in survival? He's right, Korrath said after the silence. Enhanced warriors are superior in combat. That's not supremacy rhetoric. That's a measurable performance difference that determines who lives when violence is real. Does that justify hierarchy? In a military context, yes. Partnership can debate whether capability justifies political authority. The military can't debate whether capability determines combat effectiveness. That's settled by physics and biology. Korrath's voice carried the conviction of a warrior who'd spent millennia training fighters and understanding what excellence meant. Best warriors should lead. That serves everyone, including baseline soldiers who survive because enhanced commanders make optimal tactical decisions. Shearer would say that's tyranny. Shearer doesn't risk death from suboptimal military decisions. He debates philosophy in council chambers while soldiers die from partnership protocols that constrain capability for political comfort. Korrath gestured to the training ground where soldiers continued drilling. I taught you that strength must defend the weak. That's what enhanced military leadership does, protects all Uruk citizens by ensuring the most capable warriors command defensive operations. Lugal processed his teacher's validation. Partnership said capability shouldn't determine authority. Military reality said capability determined survival. Enhanced warriors weren't better humans. We're better warriors. And being better warriors meant responsibility to lead because leadership saved lives. What happens when protecting Uruk requires overwhelming force against threats that the partnership wants to constrain? Lugal asked. Then protecting Uruk takes priority over partnership comfort, Korrath replied without hesitation. A warrior's duty is to win. A decisive victory prevents future conflict. Measured response invites escalation. Those aren't philosophical positions. They're tactical principles refined through 50,000 years of combat experience. The training session continued. Enhanced soldiers demonstrating superiority through every measurable performance metric. Baseline soldiers contributed what biology allowed them to, while accepting a hierarchy they couldn't change. Partnership institutions maintain oversight without altering outcomes. And Lugal understood that the military domain revealed most clearly what the partnership tried to obscure: biology determined capability, capability determined outcomes. Outcomes determined survival. No amount of constitutional equality changed what happened when threats were real, and processing speed mattered. Partnership Military Oversight Council. Afternoon session. The council chamber's military oversight section held representatives from across Uruk's governance structure, baseline civilians, enhanced civilians, military commanders, and immortal advisors, the partnership's attempt to prevent military power from concentrating without political accountability. Theory requiring practice. Institutions requiring enforcement. Oversight requiring authority to constrain force. Adinya chaired the session, baseline representative, 48 years old, 2 decades in partnership governance, voice of a population that understood the military protected them but worried about enhanced dominance producing a hierarchy that partnership was built to prevent. Quarterly military review, Adinya announced. Assessment of partnership integration protocols, capability distribution across command structure, civilian oversight effectiveness, constitutional compliance. The reports were projected on clay tablets that everyone could read. Command structure distribution. Enhanced commanders, 18 of 22, 82% baseline commanders, 4 of 22, 18% baseline population, 66% of Uruk. Enhanced population, 34% of Uruk. Capability-based meritocracy producing hierarchy that doesn't reflect population distribution, Adinya observed. Partnership protocols require proportional representation. Current distribution violates proportionality principles. Lugal responded from a military command position. Current distribution reflects capability requirements for combat command. Enhanced soldiers process threats 200 milliseconds faster. That advantage determines survival in tactical situations. We assign command based on ability to lead effectively, not population percentages. Meritocracy that produces permanent enhanced dominance, another baseline representative challenged. Baseline soldiers can never command in combat because biology ensures we'll always process slower. That's not meritocracy. That's biological hierarchy disguised as professional standards. That's reality, Lugal replied. Baseline soldiers contribute essential functions, logistics, sustained operations, strategic planning in non-urgent contexts. But split-second tactical decisions require processing speed distributed unequally. Forcing baseline command in combat situations doesn't serve the partnership. Kills soldiers while performing equality. Rishev spoke next, enhanced civilian representative, 37 years old, partnership council member for 8 years, voice of enhanced population that supported integration while recognizing practical limitations. The question isn't whether enhanced soldiers perform better. That's a measurable fact. The question is whether military effectiveness justifies a hierarchy that is constitutionally prohibited in political contexts. Military is different, Lugal argued. Political decisions have time for deliberation. Military decisions happen in milliseconds. Partnership can require consensus in governance because extended debate doesn't cost lives. Can't require consensus in combat because extended coordination gets soldiers killed. Then the military becomes a domain where partnership doesn't apply, Adinya replied. Where enhanced dominance is accepted because biology determines capability and capability determines survival. And that precedent spreads. If capability justifies authority in the military, why not in engineering, in medicine, in administration? Every domain with capability differences becomes justification for enhanced hierarchy. The debate continued for 3 hours. Baseline representatives are demanding proportional representation, while enhanced representatives argue for capability-based leadership. Military commanders presented training data showing that integration protocols increased casualty rates in simulated combat. Partnership oversight reached the same conclusions it reached at every quarterly review. The military domain revealed tensions the partnership couldn't resolve. Biology created advantages. Advantages determine combat outcomes. Outcomes determine survival. Constitutional equality couldn't override biology when violence was real. The session concluded with no changes to the command structure. Partnership protocols are maintained ceremonially. Military hierarchy continues practically. Oversight documenting problems it lacked the authority to prevent. Lugal departed, understanding that the military was a fracture point where partnership performance became most obviously inadequate. Council chambers could debate whether the capability justified the authority. Battlefields answered through bodies that partnership philosophy couldn't prevent. Western Border Region, disputed territory. 40 kilometers from Uruk, 3 days after the Oversight Council. The land between Uruk's sphere of influence and the baseline communities to the west had been contested for generations. Rich grazing territory, reliable water sources, strategic access to trade routes. Both populations have legitimate historical claims. Both populations are expanding. Both populations need the resources that the territory provides. Partnership councils had debated for 3 years. Neither side accepted the proposed compromises. Attempted mediation that resolved nothing. Each community believed their claims were just, their needs urgent, their rights non-negotiable. Diplomacy failing. Tensions rising. Violence is becoming inevitable as grievances accumulate that the partnership couldn't resolve. The caravan left Uruk before dawn, 12 citizens traveling to Eastern trading partners, carrying bronze goods, textiles, and grain. Standard commercial journey repeated weekly for years. Guarded by 6 warriors, 4 enhanced, 2 baseline, adequate protection for routine travel through territory Uruk considered secured. Vashti led the merchant group, a baseline woman, 41 years old, with 20 years of commercial experience navigating regional trade networks that connected Mesopotamian city-states into an economic system more advanced than political institutions governing them. She'd made this journey 40 times, knew the route, understood the risks, and accepted that commerce required traveling through disputed territories while the partnership debated ownership. The attack came mid-morning. 30 raiders from the western baseline community, farmers and herders who'd decided Uruk's caravans represented an invasion into territory they claimed rightfully. Armed with bronze weapons, organized into coordinated assault, executing a plan that suggested systematic preparation rather than spontaneous violence. The caravan guards responded immediately. Enhanced soldiers process threats, calculate tactical responses, and execute coordinated defense within milliseconds of initial attack. Baseline guards followed enhanced direction, supporting where processing speed allowed, trying to protect merchants who scattered in search of cover. But 30 attackers against 6 defenders. Overwhelming numerical advantage. Surprisingly, eliminates tactical advantages that warriors typically possessed. Geography favors attackers who know the terrain. The battle lasted 7 minutes. Enhanced guards killed 6 raiders. Superior combat skills were evident even in a losing tactical situation. But numbers mattered. Coordination mattered. Surprise mattered. When the dust settled, and the raiders withdrew with captured supplies. 12 Uruk citizens are dead. 8 baseline merchants. 4 enhanced guards who'd fought brilliantly but been overwhelmed. Bodies left in the morning sun. Families who wouldn't see them return. The community is grieving a loss while processing its implications. Baseline guards survived. Surrendered when enhanced warriors fell, and continued resistance became suicide. Raiders released them as messengers, an intentional decision to send survivors back to Uruk carrying news of what defending disputed territory cost. The survivors reached Uruk by evening. Traumatized. Bearing bodies and carrying a message that partnership diplomacy had failed and violence had begun. Partnership councils would have to respond. The question was whether the response would be a proportional attempt at justice or an overwhelming demonstration of enhanced military superiority. Lugal received the report in the command center. Studied casualty lists. Processed tactical assessment. Calculated what justice required and what military necessity demanded. 12 citizens are dead. 4 enhanced warriors were killed. Community attacked. Response required. The question was what form response would take. Military command planning session. Evening of the attack. Lugal convened senior officers, 18 enhanced commanders, 4 baseline commanders, and a partnership military oversight representative observing. The clay tablets documenting the massacre spread across the planning table showed violence that required a response, but didn't determine what response would be. Tactical assessment, Lugal began. 30 raiders from the western baseline community attacked our caravan. 12 citizens killed, supplies stolen. This was an organized assault, not random violence. Suggests systematic preparation, community support, and intentional challenge to Uruk's territorial claims. Command provided a detailed analysis. Enhanced cognition had compiled. Raiders withdrew in organized fashion after achieving objectives. Suggests military training or at least coordinated planning. Left baseline guards alive as messengers. Intentional communication strategy. Attack timing suggests surveillance of our caravan schedule. This wasn't opportunistic robbery. This was military action against Uruk interests. The baseline commander studied reports that mixed military professionalism with awareness that the response would determine whether the partnership would constrain or enhance military power. Darian spoke carefully. The attack was criminal violence requiring justice. But the target was mixed caravan, baseline and enhanced citizens. Response should be proportional apprehension of raiders for partnership tribunals, not military assault on entire community. Proportional response invites escalation, Lugal replied, channeling principles Korrath had taught across years of tactical training. Raiders conducted an organized military assault. They won't be deterred by proportional justice. They'll interpret restraint as weakness. We'll attack again. We'll encourage other communities to challenge Uruk's security. He projected tactical analysis. Enhanced processing had calculated, Western community, 300 people. 50 to 70 military-age males. Resources, agriculture, herding, and bronze weapons acquired through trade. Defenses, minimal fortifications, no professional military, capability comparable to civilian militia. You're proposing military action against the entire community because 30 raiders attacked our caravan? Another baseline commander challenged. I'm proposing a decisive response that destroys enemy military capability and prevents future attacks, Lugal clarified. Not genocide. Not a civilian massacre. Military operation targeting the community's ability to threaten Uruk citizens. That's a warrior's duty, protecting the community through overwhelming force that makes threats reconsider aggression. Kement added supporting calculation, our force, 150 enhanced soldiers, superior training, coordination, weaponry. Enhanced reflexes provide a decisive tactical advantage. Estimated combat duration, 90 minutes. Estimated casualties, 3 to 5 enhanced soldiers versus 40 to 50 enemy combatants. The operation achieves the military objective with minimal friendly losses. And baseline casualties among 300 civilians? Darian pressed. Minimized through tactical precision, Lugal said. Target military capability, not civilian population. But combat produces casualties. Civilians defending fighters become combatants. Civilians caught in tactical operations become unavoidable losses. We can't guarantee zero baseline civilian deaths. We can guarantee overwhelming success that prevents future attacks. The planning session continued for hours. Enhanced commanders supporting decisive response, military logic saying overwhelming force prevented future conflict. Baseline commanders raising concerns about proportionality, partnership logic says the response should match the provocation. Partnership oversight representative documenting discussions while lacking the authority to prevent military action. The debate revealed fundamental tension, military effectiveness required capability-based action. Partnership required consent-based restraint. Both are valid frameworks. Both produce contradictory conclusions about how Uruk should respond to violence against its citizens. Finally, vote, 18 enhanced commanders approved the operation. 4 baseline commanders opposed. The partnership oversight representative recorded objections without the authority to block the decision. The military hierarchy produces an outcome despite partnership protests, a capability determining action. The enabling force partnership in biology couldn't be constrained. Lugal began detailed planning for an operation that would demonstrate what enhanced military superiority meant when applied against baseline resistance. Tactical brilliance that would save enhanced lives while producing casualty disparity that would reveal hierarchy partnership institutions couldn't prevent. He quoted Korrath's teaching while designing the assault: decisive victory prevents future conflict. Strength must defend the weak. A warrior's duty is winning. All the principles his teacher had taught. All principles that would produce a massacre through correct application to unequal combat. Western baseline community. Night before attack. The community lay quiet under the stars, 300 people sleeping in mud brick homes built over generations, farming the land their grandparents had cultivated, herding animals their families had tended for decades. Baseline humans living as their ancestors had lived, claiming territory through occupation and use rather than the legal documents and partnership institutions required. They'd sent 30 raiders to attack Uruk's caravan. Believed their claim to the disputed territory was just. Believed Uruk's expansion was an invasion. Believed defending their land was righteous resistance against city-state dominance. Didn't understand that attacking Uruk's citizens meant engaging military force vastly superior to anything their farming community could resist. Didn't process that enhanced warriors would respond with overwhelming capability that made brave resistance into suicide. Didn't calculate that justice from a baseline perspective would be experienced as a massacre from a numerical perspective. Tomorrow, 150 enhanced soldiers will arrive at dawn. Superior training. Superior coordination. Superior reflexes give a 200 millisecond advantage in every tactical exchange. The community slept peacefully, unaware that defending their territory against what they perceived as an invasion would cost them 47 lives by noon. That justice and massacre were the same event described from different perspectives. That enhanced military superiority would produce a casualty disparity that would reveal exactly what capability differences meant when violence was real. Partnership councils debated proportionality in comfortable chambers. Battlefields answered through bodies that math could quantify and ethics couldn't justify. Dawn would demonstrate what hierarchy looked like when biology determined capability, capability determined survival, and corpses measured survival. Western Baseline Community, Dawn. 2834 BCE. The enhanced force arrived as darkness yielded to gray morning light. 150 soldiers moving in coordinated silence, made possible by training and superior kinesthetic awareness. Bronze weapons ready but not raised, professional discipline waiting for the tactical moment rather than emotional release. Lugal led from the center position, where enhanced processing could monitor all unit movements simultaneously. 29 years old. Korrath's best student applied the teachings to combat a situation that proved the principles worked exactly as taught, while producing outcomes the teacher wouldn't endorse. The tactical plan was elegant, a three-pronged assault converging from different angles, eliminating organized resistance before defenders could coordinate a response, overwhelming the enemy with force applied with surgical precision to minimize casualties and destroy enemy military capability. Not malice. Military necessity. Professional execution of an operation designed to protect Uruk by making future attacks unthinkable. The community woke to battle, only to realize it had begun. Enhanced soldiers moved faster than baseline defenders could process. Seeing threats, calculating responses, executing tactical sequences while baseline farmers are grabbing weapons, and still oriented to the situation. A 200 millisecond advantage multiplied across 150 coordinated warriors produced an overwhelming force that looked like a massacre because efficiency in unequal combat resembled atrocity. Rashid baseline farmer, 37 years old, father of 4, one of yesterday's raiders, grabbed a bronze spear and rushed to a defensive position. Training from community militia drills kicked in, assessed threat, coordinate with neighbors, formed defensive line. 3 seconds to process a situation that enhanced cognition would have handled in 300 milliseconds. Saw an enhanced warrior approaching. Movement too fast, too coordinated, too precise. Rashiv raised a spear, calculating strike angle. Enhanced warrior had already struck, pivoted, and engaged the next target before Rashiv's spear completed its defensive arc. He died before understanding what killed him. A bronze spear falling from hands that would never hold his children again. His neighbor Gath saw Rashiv fall. The shouted warning came too late because enhanced processing had already passed the moment when it could matter. Rushed forward with an agricultural scythe, the only weapon immediately available, a farming tool repurposed for desperate defense. Enhanced soldier assessed threat, improvised weapon, agricultural stance, no military training beyond basic militia drills. Calculated optimal response. Executed a disarming strike that broke Gath's wrist before transforming into a killing blow that dropped the farmer beside his neighbor. 2 dead in the time it took baseline perception to register that combat had started. Terrain baseline defender, 42 years old, veteran of multiple border skirmishes, experienced fighter who'd survived 3 previous conflicts through caution and tactical sense, shouted for organization. Form defensive positions. Protect families. Coordinate withdrawal if. Enhanced tactical squad moving on his position. 5 warriors with synchronized timing that no amount of baseline training could replicate. Terrain saw them coming, understood the mathematics. 5 enhanced against 1 experienced baseline meant death measured in seconds, not minutes. He coordinated with 3 neighbors attempting to organize resistance. Triangle formation. Watch flanks. Shift on my. Enhanced soldiers saw coordination forming. Calculated the optimal counter before terrain finished the instruction. Executed a flanking maneuver that broke formation while defenders were still positioning. Bronze weapons moved with enhanced speed, precision, and coordination, transforming professional military operations into efficient slaughter. Terrain and his 3 neighbors are dead. Defensive position eliminated. Coordination was prevented before it could become a threat. Enhanced squad leader, Mirsh, 24 years old, graduated top of combat training 2 years ago, documented tactical success without emotion because emotion degraded performance, Section 7 clear. 4 enemy combatants eliminated. 0 friendly casualties. Continuing sweep. Professional. Efficient. Producing corpses through tactical excellence that made killing look like a craft rather than a crime. Mira baseline woman, 28 years old, healer trained in traditional medicine, mother of 2 young children, emerged from home carrying medical supplies. Saw a wounded defender Hada bleeding from a shoulder strike. Rushed to provide aid because healing was reflex, because suffering demanded response, because she'd never been in combat and didn't understand that battlefields made no distinction between healer and combatant when both occupied a combat zone. Enhanced soldier, Joran, 26 years old, 5 years of combat experience, processed her appearance, unarmed. Medical supplies. Non-combatant role evident. Calculated threat, minimal. Decision, bypass, continue tactical sweep. Joran moved past Mira toward the next objective. Then, Hadov, wounded defender, Mira was approaching, and grabbed for the fallen spear despite injuries. Combat reflex overrides pain, last attempt at resistance from a dying warrior who wouldn't surrender while breath remained. Joran's enhanced perception caught movement. Process threat, wounded combatant, armed, engaging. Response required. Bronze blade arcing toward Hadov. Optimal strike calculated to eliminate the threat. Combat speed made precision impossible when the healer stood too close to the combatant, and when medical mercy positioned the non-combatant within the tactical strike zone. Mira caught the edge of the blow meant for Hadov. Not targeted. Not intended. Just an unavoidable collision between healing attempt and combat necessity. Dead as collateral during a precise tactical operation that couldn't distinguish compassion from threat at enhanced combat speed. Her children would wake to a mother who wouldn't return. Her husband would process grief while understanding she died doing precisely what a healer should do, responding to suffering without calculating whether the response costs life. Dead because battlefield made no distinction between intention and outcome, between healer and fighter, between compassion and tactical position. Joran documented, 1 civilian casualty, Section 4. Non-combatant providing aid to an armed defender during active engagement. Unavoidable. Clinical assessment. Accurate description. Death reduced to operational notation that would appear in a tactical report. Partnership oversight would review without authority to prosecute. The pattern repeated across the community. Enhanced soldiers executing a textbook assault. Baseline defenders cannot coordinate a response fast enough to effectively resist. Professional military operation producing efficient massacre through capability disparity that math predicted and biology enabled. Lyra baseline woman, 61 years old, grandmother, sheltered 3 grandchildren in the home's back room and heard battle sounds. Understood, the community was dying. Made a decision, protect children by remaining still, by avoiding attention, by hoping enhanced soldiers would bypass non-threatening targets. Enhanced soldier entering homes in tactical sweep, Evren, 28 years old, 12 years of military service. Training is required to check all structures for armed defenders. Enhanced visual processing scanned the room in milliseconds, elderly woman, 3 children, no weapons visible, no threat detected. Clear, Evren reported. Move to the following structure. Lyra and her grandchildren survived because enhanced training included civilian protection protocols, and the capability allowed distinguishing threat from innocence at combat speed. After all, massacres had limits that professional warriors maintained even during overwhelming assaults. Not all enhanced soldiers. Not all situations. But some restraint was preserved even during efficient violence. By mid-morning, organized resistance had collapsed. Surviving defenders surrendered or fled. Enhanced force-controlled community, casualty assessment beginning, tactical objectives achieved. Final count. Enhanced casualties, 3 dead, 8 wounded, 2% casualty rate. Kadak, 36 years old, baseline warrior with 18 years of service, killed in a defensive position. 2 enhanced soldiers were killed during the initial assault phase. 8 enhanced wounds, 3 critically. Baseline casualties, 47 dead, 23 wounded, 15% of community population. Among the 47 dead, 29 were military-age males who'd participated in defense, legitimate combatants. 12 were civilians, women, elderly, adolescents, caught in combat operations or defending families, ambiguous status. 6 were yesterday's raiders who'd attacked Uruk's caravan, clear military targets. From an enhanced perspective, successful military operation. Minimal friendly casualties. Enemy capability destroyed. Future attacks were prevented through an overwhelming demonstration of superior force. From a baseline perspective, massacre. Disproportionate response. Civilian casualties. The community was devastated through the efficient application of biological superiority that the partnership was supposed to constrain. From a tactical perspective, exactly what happened when processing speed advantage met numerical disadvantage in organized combat. Math predicting outcomes in biology is enabled. Lugal surveyed results with professional satisfaction and no visible remorse. Operation executed as planned. Casualties within projected parameters. Tactical objectives achieved. Uruk was protected through a decisive victory that made future challenges unthinkable. He'd followed Korrath's teaching perfectly. Decisive victory, preventing future conflict. Strength defending the weak. The warrior's duty was to win. All correct principles produce a massacre when applied correctly. Uruk Military Command, Afternoon Report. Lugal presented operational results to the Partnership Military Oversight Council through a professional briefing documenting a successful mission to protect Uruk interests against a confirmed military threat. Operation objectives achieved, Lugal reported. Enemy military capability destroyed. Enhanced casualties minimal, 3 dead, 8 wounded. Tactical execution optimal, operation completed in 92 minutes with textbook precision. He projected casualty assessment on clay tablets, enemy losses, 47 killed, 23 wounded. The majority were confirmed combatants, 35 individuals who participated in defensive operations with weapons. 12 civilian casualties occurred during combat operations when civilians defended armed family members or were caught in tactical engagements. Partnership oversight representatives processed numbers revealing a disparity that tactics explained but ethics questioned. 47 dead, 3 lost, Adenia stated. 15-to-1 casualty ratio. That's not combat. That's overwhelming force producing a massacre. That's a capability advantage applied to a military objective, Lugal replied. Enhanced soldiers process faster, coordinate better, and fight more effectively. Superior capability produces superior outcomes. We protected Uruk while minimizing our casualties. That's a successful military operation by any professional metric. What about proportionality? Another representative challenged. 12 Uruk citizens died in a caravan attack. Your response killed 47. How is that proportional? Proportionality isn't body count matching, Lugal explained. Proportionality is a response adequate to prevent future attacks. Raiders killed 12. We eliminated the raiding capability. They won't attack again. Neither will other communities consider similar action. That's proportional to threat, not to initial casualties. Darian spoke from baseline commander position, voice controlled but eyes showing what partnership oversight couldn't constrain. 12 civilian casualties among the 47. Women, the elderly, and adolescents. How do you justify civilian deaths as military necessity? Combat produces civilian casualties when civilians defend combatants or occupy combat zones, Lugal replied. We targeted military capability, not civilians. But civilians defending armed family members become combatants, civilians in homes where defenders operate become casualties. We can't guarantee 0 civilian deaths in military operations. We can guarantee mission success with minimal friendly losses. The investigation continued for hours. Partnership representatives examining every casualty, questioning every tactical decision, challenging the proportionality of response that achieved military objectives while producing outcomes that looked like an atrocity from specific perspectives. Enhanced representatives defended the operation as a military necessity. Baseline representatives condemned the operation as excessive force. Hybrid representatives are caught between understanding tactical logic and recognizing moral catastrophe. Immortals are divided on whether protecting Uruk justified the methods that revealed enhanced dominance. Finally, Rishev articulated the question underlying all debate: was this military operation or a demonstration of enhanced supremacy? Were you protecting Uruk or proving enhanced warriors can overwhelm baseline resistance whenever you choose? Lugal met the question directly: both. Protecting Uruk required demonstrating that attacking Uruk citizens would cost more than communities could afford. Enhanced military superiority is a fact. Applying that superiority to a legitimate defensive objective serves everyone. Partnership wants to constrain capability. Combat requires using capability. Those positions are incompatible. He stood, warrior's posture showing no apology for efficiency. Ethics questioned. I followed my training. Applied the principles my teacher taught. Achieved military objectives protecting Uruk. If a partnership wants different outcomes, the partnership needs different soldiers. But baseline soldiers can't match enhanced combat performance. So partnership must choose: accept enhanced military leadership that produces results, or constrain capability and accept higher Uruk casualties when we're attacked. The session concluded without resolution. Partnership oversight documented concerns without the authority to prosecute. Enhanced commanders praised tactical excellence. Baseline commanders expressed moral objections to the operation's success, which made it politically difficult to pursue. Hybrid representatives recognized hierarchy in the military domain, revealed most starkly. Lugal departed, understanding he demonstrated exactly what capability differences meant in a domain where capability determined survival. Partnership could debate proportionality in councils. Battlefields answered through bodies that math predicted, and ethics couldn't prevent. Order safe house, Uruk. 3 days after massacre. Before dawn. Methuselah stood among the prepared bodies. What remained after funeral preparations transformed combat casualties into peaceful dead, ready for ritual burial. Enhanced eyesight perceived details that baseline vision would miss, defensive wounds suggesting desperate resistance, injury patterns demonstrating biological mismatch, and precise evidence that superior capability translated into lethal advantage when teachings were weaponized. One of the 3 baseline warriors killed was an Order member. Kadok had served the Covenant for 23 years, monitoring military consolidation while training warriors who would never match the enhanced combat capability he'd warned was approaching, with mathematical certainty that warning couldn't prevent. He died documenting the exact crisis he'd predicted. Enhanced humans using superior capability for dominance. Good teachings become lethal weapons when applied by a superior force against an inferior opposition. Biological advantage translates into casualties that partnership's institutional protections can't prevent, despite ethical commitments that desperately try. He knew, Inara said quietly, standing beside Methuselah in a chamber that most Uruk residents didn't know existed, a hidden space beneath the temple where the Order preserved truth for revelation most humans wouldn't witness in their lifetimes. New enhanced warriors were consolidating. New Lugal was dangerous. Stayed anyway because someone needed to document what was coming. She placed the encoded tablet on the preparation table, Kadok's final report, hidden among personal effects that the family would never recognize as anything except sentimental records. Documentation of training patterns showing enhanced warriors gravitating toward each other. Casualty predictions, calculating the probability of a massacre. Warnings that had reached Order coordinators 3 weeks before combat occurred. Warnings they'd done nothing about. Methuselah collected the report, enhanced cognition processing guilt that the warning hadn't prevented the tragedy, and institutional necessity that Order survival required avoiding exposure, even when exposure might save individual lives. Covenant demanded sacrifice. Sometimes that sacrifice was life itself. He served, Methuselah said formally, words his father had taught him to speak over members who died in service to purposes they believed necessary but couldn't guarantee sufficient. He witnessed the truth. He documented reality. He prepared future generations for honesty that the current generation couldn't handle. The Order remembers. The Order preserves. The Order ensures his death meant something beyond tragedy. Inara's expression carried the weight of 41 years of serving the Covenant, watching members die in service, preserving their final documentation while questioning whether preservation justified sacrifice. Could we have prevented this? If we'd warned Korrath about Lugal's intentions? If we'd exposed consolidation before it produced casualties? Warning: Korrath reveals Order existence. Exposing consolidation accelerates revelation timeline before either species is ready. Methuselah's voice carried the burden of his father's passing without permission, leadership requiring choices that felt wrong regardless of direction. We couldn't save Khadik without endangering the Covenant. Couldn't prevent massacre without exposing organization that revelation preparation requires. So we document instead. Bitterness colored Inara's tone despite understanding necessity. We watch members die documenting dangers we know about, preserving warnings we can't share, serving purposes that feel increasingly like excuses for inaction. Documentation is action. Methuselah spoke with conviction that felt like desperation, with certainty that wavered under the weight of choices that produced casualties. When revelation comes, humans will judge immortal intervention. They'll ask, did anyone resist? Did anyone document? Did anyone preserve evidence showing biological inequality produced political pressure, military consolidation, casualties that partnership couldn't prevent despite institutions attempting prevention? He gestured to Khadik's body, a baseline warrior who died serving a Covenant most baseline warriors would never know existed. Khadik's death proves consolidation wasn't a conspiracy, it was a convergence of enhanced warriors recognizing capability advantages. His documentation shows that partnership institutions failed to prevent violence despite ethical commitments opposing it. His sacrifice demonstrates Order members risked lives preserving truth rather than comfortable lies about equity, succeeding where equity demonstrably failed. He began encoding Khadik's final report into preservation formats that would survive geological time, each symbol carrying the weight of a member who died documenting exactly what symbols described. Someday, centuries hence, when revelation transforms hidden history into public knowledge, humans will see these reports. We'll understand that enhanced military dominance emerged from biological advantage rather than malicious intent. We'll recognize baseline warriors who faced impossible odds despite courage matching that of any enhanced warrior. We'll judge whether partnerships' attempt mattered despite partnerships' failure to prevent casualties. And if they judge the attempt was insufficient? Inara asked. If they'd decide documentation without prevention was cowardice rather than Covenant service? Then we accept their judgment. Methuselah continued encoding despite his trembling hands from exhaustion and grief. Father built Order, knowing future generations might condemn what we preserved. Might question whether watching was sufficient when intervention might have prevented. Might decide Covenant served immortal secrecy more than human welfare. He sealed the encoded tablet in quantum storage, where molecular bonds would preserve the information until the universe's heat death. But they'll be informed. They'll judge understanding the complete context. They'll judge knowing that beings tried, inadequately, insufficiently, unsuccessfully, but tried nonetheless to maintain partnership despite biology refusing cooperation, to preserve equity despite capability suggesting hierarchy, to serve both secrecy and eventual disclosure despite contradiction inherent in serving both simultaneously. Awan entered through a quantum doorway, expression carrying news that news never improved. Lugal is gathering enhanced warriors and talking about capability proving superiority, about massacre demonstrating baseline inadequacy, about partnership constraining natural leadership. He's not hiding consolidation anymore. He's celebrating it. Document everything. Methuselah's command carried the weight of a leader who'd inherited the organization without choosing it, who'd served the Covenant unto death without knowing whether service justified sacrifice. Every gathering. Every argument. Every warrior who joins. Every baseline warrior who fears. Everything. We're watching a partnership collapse, Awan said quietly. Watching military consolidation that Chapter 15 will show produces a coup attempt. Watching a crisis approach that we do not prevent. At what point does observation become complicity? When we stop documenting honestly. Methuselah looked at Kadok's body, a baseline warrior who'd served the Covenant faithfully and died serving still, whose death proved that consolidation dangers were real rather than merely predicted. We're not complicit in consolidation. We're witnesses to it. There's a difference, perhaps a small difference, perhaps an insufficient difference, but a difference that matters when revelation requires understanding how consolidation emerged, how partnership responded, how humans chose between equity and efficiency when biology made efficiency easier. He spoke formal words over Kadok's body, a ritual his father had established, a commitment that every Order member received regardless of mission success or failure. You serve the Covenant. You witnessed truths others couldn't see or wouldn't acknowledge. You documented the reality that institutions overlooked or were unable to address. You prepared future generations for honesty, but the present generation couldn't handle it. Your death serves as a revelation. Your sacrifice serves both species. Your service serves purposes neither species fully comprehends, but both desperately need. The words felt inadequate. Always felt inadequate when spoken over by members who died serving. But inadequacy didn't eliminate necessity. Partnership was inadequate. Institutions were inadequate. Documentation was inadequate. Everything was inadequate because biology didn't negotiate with ethics, capability created pressure toward hierarchy, and inadequate institutions were still better than abandoning the attempt at equity entirely. Kadok would be buried with baseline warriors, his Order membership hidden from family who deserved knowing his service but couldn't know without compromising the Covenant that his death had served. His final report would be preserved in archives that would survive civilizational collapse, geological time, cosmic entropy, waiting for a revelation that would explain why the baseline warrior had documented military consolidation while training warriors unable to match enhanced capabilities. The Order remembered. Even when remembering the hurt. Especially when remembering hurt. Because pain was evidence that members cared about beings they served while serving purposes that those beings couldn't comprehend. Because sacrifice demonstrated commitment transcending self-interest. Because deaths in service proved the Covenant demanded more than documentation demanded, members risked everything to preserve truth for a future that might never arrive or might arrive, condemning everything preservation had required. Methuselah continued encoding. Inara assisted. Awan coordinated with other members documenting enhanced consolidation accelerating across regions. And Kadok's body waited for a burial that would hide his service while preserving his contribution to revelation that would, eventually, honor his sacrifice by explaining the purposes his death had served. The Covenant demanded sacrifice. Sometimes, sacrifice was life. Sometimes, the required documentation dies while documenting. Sometimes service costs everything while serving purposes that felt increasingly questionable but remained, perhaps, necessary nonetheless. The Order preserved. The Order remembered. The Order honored. And baseline warrior who died documenting enhanced dominance was laid to rest among warriors who'd never know he'd served purposes transcending combat, preserving truths transcending victory or defeat, preparing revelation that would transcend any individual life or death while honoring every sacrifice that preparation had required. Korrath's training complex, evening. The Immortal warrior stood alone on the observation platform overlooking training grounds where he taught combat principles for 5 decades. Every lesson is refined through 50,000 years of experience. Every principle has been tested across millennia of conflict. Every technique is optimized to produce warriors who protect communities through superior force. And now watching his best student apply those teachings to produce a massacre that tactics justified but conscience condemned. Lugal cited his training during the investigation and quoted specific lessons, referencing particular scenarios. Every citation is accurate. Every principle is correctly applied. Student demonstrating mastery through efficient violence that the teacher would oppose, yet couldn't disown without disowning the teachings themselves. Decisive victory prevents future conflict was what Korrath had taught and believed. It has been proven across thousands of engagements that overwhelming force saved lives by making continued resistance pointless. Strength must defend the weak, Korrath had taught that and embodied it. Built warrior ethics around responsibility, superior capability, and the commitment to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. A warrior's duty is winning, Korrath had taught that and lived it. Understood that combat wasn't a philosophy debate where both sides survived to continue arguing. Combat was a survival mechanism where losing meant death. All good principles. All correct teachings. All producing massacres when applied by superior force against inferior opposition. Lugal hadn't misunderstood, hadn't misapplied, and hadn't violated training. He'd executed perfectly. 47 dead because Korrath's student had learned exactly what Korrath taught. The weight settled heavily, not guilt for teaching wrong principles, but recognition that correct principles became weapons when power was unequal. That strength defending weak became strength dominating weak when weak meant biologically disadvantaged by processing speed. Korrath's mind traveled back across 50,000 years of combat training. Homeworld. Centuries of teaching warriors of relatively equal capability. Principles that worked when fights were between beings sharing similar physical attributes, similar processing speeds, and similar capacity to survive training's demands. But Earth was different. Enhanced humans weren't teaching equals, they were teaching biological superiors operating in partnership with biological inferiors. The same principles applied to unequal populations didn't produce the same results. Decisive victory between equals meant clean military success. Between unequal forces meant massacre. He'd known this theoretically. Had warned Prometheus about giving fire to humans who weren't ready, had cautioned Talia about genetic modifications creating permanent hierarchy, and had understood intellectually that intervention created complications that pure observation wouldn't produce. But teaching Lugal had been different. Had felt like homeworld training because Lugal was enhanced, was capable, was processing combat scenarios with speed and precision that matched Korrath's own capabilities. Easy to forget that students would apply teachings against baseline humans who couldn't match enhanced performance. Easy to teach strength without teaching restraint, because homeworld warriors fighting require more strength than restraint. Easy to emphasize decisive victory because equals fighting equals could force a stalemate that restraint might prevent. Easy to prioritize winning because losing to equals meant death rather than dominance. All correct for homeworld. All catastrophic for Earth. Footsteps approached. Korrath recognized Cadence, Lugal, coming for confrontation, both knew it was inevitable. They're questioning the operation, Lugal said without preamble. Partnership oversight treats military success as moral failure because outcomes disturb them. I need you to confirm I followed my training correctly. You did, Korrath replied. Honest assessment from a teacher who couldn't deny the student had executed the lessons perfectly. Every tactical decision was optimal. Every principle was correctly applied. You demonstrated mastery. Then why do you look troubled? Because mastery producing 47 dead makes me question what I taught, Korrath said. Warrior is honest enough to confront implications. I taught you to protect, not dominate. To defend, not massacre. To use strength for justice, not demonstration of superiority. I did protect, Lugal replied with certainty of someone whose logic was unassailable. Protected Uruk by eliminating the threat and defended Uruk citizens by destroying the enemy's capability, used strength for justice, justice for the 12 killed in the caravan attack. You taught me that strength serves justice. Enhanced strength serves enhanced justice. What am I missing? Context, Korrath said, recognition crystallizing through conversation. I taught you principles that worked on homeworld, where warriors trained equals. Didn't adapt teaching for Earth where enhanced warriors operate against baseline populations. Strength serving justice assumes rough equality between strength and threat. When strength vastly exceeds threat, serving justice becomes imposing dominance. I eliminated the military threat that attacked Uruk citizens. How is that dominance rather than justice? Korrath turned from the training grounds, facing the student directly, 47 dead, 3 lost. That ratio doesn't reflect threat assessment, it reflects capability disparity. If the baseline community truly threatened Uruk, casualties would be more balanced. A 15-to-1 disparity proves they never could threaten Uruk meaningfully. The operation proved to be a demonstration more than a defense. Demonstration prevents future attacks, Lugal countered. You taught that decisive victory prevents conflict. Overwhelming response makes resistance unthinkable. Between equals, yes. Between unequal forces, demonstration becomes tyranny. Korrath felt the weight of 50,000 years providing insufficient wisdom for 5,000 years on Earth. I taught ethics appropriate for warriors defending against comparable threats. Didn't teach ethics for a superior force operating against an inferior. That's my failure. What ethics should I have followed? Lugal's frustration was visible now. Lose more enhanced soldiers to make baseline casualties more palatable? Give defenders a better chance to kill Uruk warriors? Accept higher friendly losses for partnership comfort? Should have questioned whether overwhelming force was necessary, Korrath replied. Whether protecting Uruk required destroying the community. Whether justice demanded 47 deaths for 12. Whether serving strength by restraining strength might have protected Uruk while preserving partnership. That's philosophy, not tactics. Combat demands capability application, not capability restraint. Combat between unequals demands both. Korrath's voice carried conviction, emerging from recognition rather than prior certainty. You're not evil, Lugal. You're competent. Logical. Professional. Applying training that works exactly as designed. And producing outcomes that reveal training was insufficient for the context where you operate. He gestured to the training grounds where enhanced soldiers would drill tomorrow, learning tactics that would serve protection or dominance, depending on the power relationships between the warrior and the defended. I taught homeworld ethics to Earth warriors. Taught equals fighting equals principles to a superior fighting inferior context. Taught winning without teaching when not to fight. Taught strength without teaching wisdom. Taught capability without teaching responsibility for how biological superiority is applied when claiming partnership requires biological equality. So I'm wrong because biology made me superior? Lugal challenged. Because enhanced capabilities mean I should fight with one hand tied to make combat fair for baseline defenders? You're right tactically and wrong ethically, Korrath replied. Both simultaneously. That's complexity I didn't prepare you for. 47 dead proves the operation succeeded militarily. Also proves operation failed partnership by demonstrating enhanced dominance partnership exists to prevent. Both true. Both your responsibility. Both my failure for not teaching you to navigate both. Lugal's silence confirmed he hadn't expected the teacher to accept partial responsibility without defending the entire teaching, and he expected Korrath to either endorse the operation fully or condemn it absolutely. Not this both in recognition that the student had learned correctly, while the teacher had taught insufficiently. What happens now? Lugal asked. I redesigned training, Korrath said. Future warriors learn restraint equally with capability. Learn when not to fight alongside, and how to win. Learn wisdom before receiving advanced tactics. Learn responsibility for biological advantage before learning how to maximize advantage. That makes warriors less effective. Makes warriors more complete. You protected Uruk. Also undermined the partnership. More complete training produces warriors who achieve protection without producing dominance. That's what Earth requires that Homeworld didn't. Warriors who win without demonstrating supremacy, who defend without dominating, who serve strength by knowing when to restrain strength. And if restraint gets enhanced, soldiers killed? Then some enhanced soldiers die, preventing a partnership collapse that threatens all enhanced humans, Korrath replied. Weight of recognition settling. Individual survival isn't the only metric. Partnership survival matters. You protected Uruk while accelerating military consolidation that threatens partnership foundations. Both real. Both consequential. Neither reducible to simple right or wrong. Lugal departed unconvinced. The student maintained he'd followed training correctly, which he had. The student believed outcomes proved training was proper, which they did tactically. The student did not process that tactical success could be moral failure when power was unequal. Korrath remained alone with recognition that 50,000 years of warrior training hadn't prepared him for teaching warriors operating from biological superiority. Those principles, refined over millennia of combat between equals, became tyranny when applied by the enhanced against the baseline. Good teachings could be weaponized by logical application to unequal conflict. The sun set over training grounds where tomorrow's enhanced soldiers would learn different ethics. Where future warriors would receive wisdom alongside strength. Where Korrath would attempt to teach what he'd failed to teach Lugal, that capability without restraint produces tyranny that feels like justice, that overwhelming force serves dominance more than defense, that being a superior warrior means responsibility for how superiority is applied when partnership requires treating different capabilities as equal in worth. Teacher's burden, accepting responsibility for what students did with the teachings while recognizing that students chose how to apply what they learned. Partial responsibility without total guilt. Understanding he'd enabled a massacre without intending it. Knowing what future training is needed, he hadn't previously considered the ethics requirements essential. 47 dead because Korrath had taught strength without teaching wisdom and had taught victory without teaching restraint. Had taught capability without teaching responsibility for how biological superiority was applied in partnership, claiming biological equality. The weight would inform all future training, ethics evaluation before tactical instruction. Restraint is taught equally with capability. Wisdom is required alongside strength. But damage was done. Enhanced military dominance demonstrated. Partnership oversight was revealed as insufficient to constrain the force biology enabled. Lugal learning the wrong lesson, that capability justified action regardless of partnership constraints. Seeds planted for Chapter 15's coup attempt. Military consolidation is accelerating. Partnership discovering its most painful limitation, constitutional equality couldn't protect in combat where milliseconds mattered, and biology determined survival. Partnership Council, emergency session. 3 days after the massacre. The whole Partnership Council convened, 163 representatives from 17 regions, 9 Immortals as advisors, observers from communities affected by military action. The chamber is filled. The atmosphere, carrying the weight of the crisis, everyone understood, threatened the partnership's foundations. This wasn't a philosophical debate over a weighted voting amendment. This was bodies forcing practical confrontation with what capability differences meant when violence was real. Adenia opened a formal investigation, 47 baseline humans dead in a military operation responding to an attack that killed 12 Uruk citizens. Casualty disparity, 4-1. Civilian casualties, 12. Tactical superiority, enabling efficient violence that the partnership was built to prevent. Question: does military necessity justify force that reveals an enhanced dominance partnership constitutionally prohibits? Lugal provided detailed operational defense. Enhanced representative supported military effectiveness. Baseline representatives condemned the disproportionate response. The debate circled positions everyone already held, searching for a resolution that would either constrain enhanced military power or acknowledge that such a constraint was impossible. Then Lugal played a decisive card. I applied the training provided by an immortal warrior who has taught combat for 50,000 years. Korrath taught every principle I followed. Every tactical decision reflected his instruction. Every outcome resulted from applying his teachings correctly. If the operation was wrong, the training was insufficient. If training was correct, operation was justified. He projected specific lessons. Decisive victory prevents future conflict. Korrath, Training Session 2827 BCE. Strength must defend the weak through overwhelming force. Korrath, Tactical Seminar 2830 BCE. A warrior's duty is protecting the community by destroying threats. Korrath, Strategy Doctrine 2825 BCE. Measured response invites escalation. Dominance creates deterrence. Korrath, Combat Ethics Discussion 2829 BCE. Every citation is accurate. Every quote verified. The student systematically demonstrates the teacher's principles and justified actions. The teacher would question them. Enhanced representatives. If Korrath's training produced this outcome, training validates operation. Immortal, with 50,000 years of warrior experience, taught these principles because they work. Lugal proved principles work. Partnership's discomfort with outcomes doesn't make principles wrong. Baseline representatives. Korrath's training assumed combat between relative equals. Applied with enhanced force against baseline defenders, the same principles produce a massacre. Teaching isn't wrong, application to biologically unequal conflict is wrong. That's what partnership was built to prevent. Shearer spoke from a baseline leadership position, 62 years old now, voice carrying the weight of representing a population that understood mathematics favored enhanced military dominance. Lugal followed training that assumed equality. Korrath taught warriors fighting equals. Enhanced humans aren't on equal footing when fighting baseline populations. That's not Korrath's fault. That's biology creating context his training didn't account for. Talia added from an immortal advisory position, I created biological inequality that the military domain reveals most starkly. Enhancement gives a processing advantage that determines combat outcomes. That's my intervention-producing hierarchy. Korrath's training serves warriors excellently. My modification makes excellent warriors into a dominant force that can't be constrained through institutional equality alone. The admission shifted the discussion from blame to recognition, multiple failures converging. Enhanced genetics creates a capability disparity, warrior training designed for equals applied to unequals. Military necessity conflicts with partnership equity. Institutional protections are insufficient when biology determines outcomes faster than institutions can respond. Korrath spoke from an immortal advisory position. Lugal's right. He applied my training correctly. I taught principles that work when warriors protect communities from comparable threats. Didn't adequately teach the ethical constraints required when warriors possess an overwhelming biological advantage. That's my failure as a teacher. His success as a student reveals that teaching was incomplete. The admission shifted the debate. The teacher is accepting partial responsibility without exonerating the student. Recognizing sound principles can lead to tyranny when applied by superior force against the inferior. Understanding that warrior ethics in partnership required a different framework than warrior ethics among relative equals. Military reforms, Korrath proposed. All future warrior training includes ethics evaluation before tactical instruction. Warriors must demonstrate understanding of restraint, proportionality, and civilian protection before learning advanced combat techniques. Enhanced warriors receive additional ethical training specifically addressing how to constrain capability when operating against baseline opposition. Enhanced objection, ethics requirements reduce combat effectiveness. Enhanced warriors already operate with a processing advantage. Adding ethical hesitation increases casualties. Korrath, ethics don't create hesitation. Ethics create judgment. Knowing when to apply force and when to show restraint. Lugal achieved military objectives while producing casualties that strengthen baseline resentment. A more complete warrior would have achieved objectives with less damage to the partnership. That's what ethics training enables. Baseline counter, ethics training doesn't solve biology determining combat outcomes. Enhanced warriors will still dominate regardless of ethical instruction. Reform doesn't address the hierarchy of the military domain. Korrath doesn't solve biology. Constrains how biology is applied. Enhanced warriors will remain superior in combat. Ethics training ensures superiority serves protection without becoming domination. That's achievable even if it doesn't eliminate advantage. The debate continued for days. Partnership discovering that the military domain forced confrontation with questions the council chambers could avoid. What happens when biology determines capability? Capability determines survival, and survival requires force that partnership institutions can't constrain. Reforms proposed but insufficient. Ethics evaluation before advanced combat training. Proportionality requirements for military responses. Civilian protection protocols in combat operations. Integrated command structures requiring baseline approval for operations. Partnership oversight with binding authority over military actions. Every reform that addresses symptoms without solving the underlying problem. Biology created a processing speed advantage. Processing speed determined combat outcomes. Combat outcomes couldn't wait for partnership consensus when milliseconds mattered, and threats were real. Partnership could require oversight. It couldn't prevent biology from determining who lived when violence happened faster than baseline commanders could process threats. Session concluded with reforms adopted, Lugal reprimanded but not prosecuted, military structure unchanged despite enhanced dominance revealed. Partnership discovering it could document problems, propose solutions, maintain oversight, but couldn't override biology when combat required capability. Partnership institutions couldn't distribute equally. Final scene, Lugal's quarters, night. The warrior sat alone, reviewing the operation from a tactical perspective, with 53 bodies prove the partnership's military problem. Lugal calls it a successful operation. Gilgamesh calls it a massacre. Korrath calls it inadequate teaching. The Order calls it inevitable. All describe the same event from perspectives that won't reconcile. The military problem isn't that enhanced warriors are malicious. It's that biological superiority is absolute. When one population is so militarily dominant that resistance is suicide, constitutional equality becomes meaningless when violence serves efficiency. Caddick died documenting that truth. Order member among the 53. His death preserved for revelation that will judge whether documentation justifies existence, whether observation justifies non-intervention, whether preserving truth matters when truth is bodies. The Enochian order encoded everything. Lugal's tactical report shows professional execution. Korrath's crisis, recognizing that he taught strength without ethics. The pattern that military dominance isn't hypothetical, it's operational. This concludes Part 1 of the Bronze Kings. Chapters 1 through 8, The Forgetting. Gilgamesh dying. Enkidu questioning. Enhanced consolidation is accelerating. Baseline resistance is proving futile, constitutional protection survived by 5 votes. Military superiority is making resistance suicidal. Part 2 begins with Chapter 9, The Infrastructure Choice. Zephyrus learns that every building decision is political. That optimal design excludes populations that can't maintain complexity. That architecture choosing efficiency over accessibility becomes a hierarchy through apparently neutral technical requirements. Chapters 9 through 12 will be available soon. Subscribe to be notified when they release. Thank you for joining me through these first 8 chapters. For listening as a partnership faces its first crisis, staying with the complexity that refuses simple answers. If this series is making you think differently about capability, justice, and biological hierarchy, please share it with someone who values questions more than answers. Leave a comment. When one group is so militarily superior that resistance is suicide, is that defense or massacre?